Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
I hope everyone is off to a great start to the week. Tonight is our second Halloween show. Not all time, but just last week and tonight. But that does not mean we won't be covering doubles and dualities and doppelgangers. We have an expert in that cinematic theme, and he is returning for about his 10th Nightlight appearance. Here he is, Robert W. Sullivan IV. How are you, Rob?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me on the Nightlight for the Halloween special.
Oh.
Happy Halloween. It's my pleasure to be here, of course.
Oh, yeah, glad you're here. Yeah, you've had a lot of success with your Royal Arch of Enoch, Pact with the Devil, Cinema Symbolism II, and you are now out with Cinema Symbolism III. So what was your motivation behind continuing your explorations of all these symbols and hidden meanings in all these, largely horror movies?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, kind of like a continuation of the first two books. There was more movies that I wanted to analyze that I thought were worthy of analysis, that had a lot going on in them. At least I obviously, some of the movies, for example, were, came out after the second and first book came out. I remember when I was doing the second one, the one movie that was just coming out was the Beauty and the Beast one, the live action one. And I wanted to cover it, but I couldn't put it in part two. It would have slowed it up too much. It would have delayed it too much. So I thought, well, I'll just do that in part three. But I did have a nice Disney section in part two. I thought, this would really go well with it. But I opted against it. I put it in part three, the current book. And it's funny how it works, because you plan on certain things, and you think to yourself, I'll do it in the next one, and then the next one comes around, it's like, you run out of space. I mean, I knew I was planning on for the part three to cover more Disney. I was going to do that kind of dark phase that they had in the late 70s, early 80s, with movies like The Watcher in the Woods and The Black Hole, Something Wicked This Way Comes, something like, movies like that. But
right.
it just didn't come to fruition. I just ran out of space. There was too many other movies I wanted to cover. So no, it's a continuation of just continuing it on. And even now, I've already started outlining part four. There is a ton of movies out there that I want to talk about. Some are already out, some are out now, and some are coming out. Of course, and I'll wrap up on this, the movies that I haven't seen yet, I'm speculating that they'll have an undercurrent and an occult undercurrent. So I'm talking about movies like The Matrix 4, which is due out in December, and there's one that's coming out the end of this week, The Last Night in Soho. That looks like it's got a lot going on. That looks like almost, I haven't seen it yet, but that almost looks like it has a Gnostic underpinning with, a false reality, a dream world or something. So, Cinema Symbolism 4 is already being outlined. And it's just something I love to do, and it's something that I love writing about.
Okay. Well, let us know when part 4 is out. And
Oh, yeah. That'll be a while.
Okay. But, since this is the, week of costumes, let's look at Elvis's costumes. You have a really fantastic, well-done chapter on Elvis. Doesn't seem like he'd be a candidate for Cinema Symbolism 3, but Elvis does fit in. So let's talk about the King's costumes.
Well, the thing with, it's funny, we were talking about this off air, and this was something that started back in the first book was, and again, it's something that, just comes straight out of the world of the supernatural. It's not, there's no human hand behind this. You call it Jungian synchronicity, what have you. But the one thing I noticed, and I talk about in the very first movie book, was the solar sort of symbolism, how Elvis's life runs parallel with the sun, and it's quite astounding. And I talked about it briefly in the first book, and no one really asked me about it. I was somewhat surprised about it. So I thought I fleshed it out a little bit more in the third book. I mean, certainly Elvis has made a ton of movies, and is more probably obviously known more for his music, of course, but was a Hollywood, star. I mean, made a lot of movies. So I thought, okay, I mean, he associates with Hollywood, so I thought, okay, well, that's fair game. And I just did a chapter in CS3 just fleshing out more of the solar symbolism, iconography is probably the better word, surrounding Elvis. And like I said, when I did it in the first book, I was a little surprised not too many people asked me about it, but, that's okay. And but now, I guess with it having its own chapter in the third book, more and more people have been asking me about it. And it's one of those things where I kind of just tell people, just read the book. It's better explained in the book than probably I could say it. But what it ultimately boils down to is there is just an overwhelming, and it's example after example after example. And like I said, it's not a human hand behind it. It's definitely coming out of the world of the supernatural. That Elvis's career and his life is just surrounded with solar iconography from start to finish. And if you understand sort of, and I get into this in the book, sort of Elvis's place in, the United States, as the king of rock and roll, things like that, it kind of almost, it explains itself. But again, it's so bizarre and so weird. And like I said, it's one of those examples that there's not a human hand behind it. It's something that's supernatural. And I guess for me, that's what makes it much more interesting. I mean, the one thing that I've come to believe it in with some of this movie symbolism, not all of it, but some of it, is you're definitely dealing with a supernatural element to it. I mean, it can't be planned out. There's no way possible a human hand could be behind some of this. Elvis is one example. Again, the 9/11 lead up is another one. So yeah, I mean, I was real happy with the way the Elvis chapter came out, and like I said, that was sort of an extension from the first book. It was mentioned, I think, I briefly touched on it in the introduction, I think, in the first book. I have to go back and look. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting topic, and like I said, I was happy with the way. I know you were saying you really liked it, and I was real happy with the way it came out.
Oh yeah, I was once you started laying out sun records and the Aztec sun belt in Memphis, connecting all the dots that we see all the time, but we don't really put it all together. You linked everything. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
wow. It really, if this is something a supernatural element, putting all this energy into Elvis and what he did for millions of fans for 20 years, a little over 20 years. It does seem like there's something supernatural that brought a lot of joy to people around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely beyond a coincidence. I remember when I first started looking at this, it was just like, it's one example falls after another and another, and you're like, oh, come on, no way. I mean, and I mean, but it's there. I mean, it's not. I mean,
you can't
it's not
fake
like
his birthday.
Right. You can't fake his birthday. You can't fake the book he was reading. You can't fake when he died. You can't fake Sun Records. It's just one example after another, after another, after another. And it became quite apparent to me, I guess, just as coming from a legal background, we're obviously beyond a coincidence here. And it's not something that's, this isn't something that a human planned out. I mean, this isn't, a human hand behind out of this. So the only way you can really reconcile it is come up with, that there is some sort of supernatural element involved in this. Now, what that is and what its motivation is or what have you, we'd be speculating on. But it's without question, an example of sort of the the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm, as it were, that Elvis, sort of incorporating all this solar, the as above, so below almost of Hermes Trismegistus. It's quite astounding, like I said, and it was something that I really, when I wrote about it in the first book, I started finding some more examples. I thought, well, when I was doing the third book, when I was outlining, I thought I'll do a whole chapter on Elvis this. Let's give Elvis this whole chapter rather than just giving it a honorable mention. Let's do a whole chapter on Elvis. And I know you said it was probably your favorite part of the book, and thank you for that. And like I said, I was real happy with the way it came out.
Oh yeah, I really enjoy Elvis. I've kind of spoken about him here and there on a couple of occasions when it came up. Just a couple of weeks ago was the last time it came up in when we did the Jimi Hendrix show. It came up briefly at the beginning, but it's he's just one of these people that people continue to gravitate to him, and the little bit of lists of these sun imagery reinforces the public's perception of him bringing light, or however you want to look at it. But what was the name of the book he was reading when he did?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was about the Shroud of Turin. It was one of two books, I believe, about the Shroud of Turin. The thing with Elvis is he's become a bit. He's beginning. Of late, I've noticed they're reviving him a little bit. I know and it's the same thing. It's the same technique they're using to convey the same thing. If you watch Blade Runner 2049, when they're in Las Vegas and there's the holographic Elvis performing, The song he's performing, the song he's singing is naturally Suspicious Minds, and of course that reflects the two characters of Kay and Descartes, because they're both suspicious of one another. And then in the one movie that just came out this year, the third Conjuring movie, The Devil Made Me Do It, there's a scene where they're driving to a crime scene or a crime location, and Suspicious Minds once again is playing on the radio, and Lorraine, that's Vera Farmiga, actually makes the comment. She points it out and says, this song could, best describes our the way we feel about each other right now. So Hollywood's, for whatever reason, just two examples, Elvis seems to be getting a bit of a comeback in Hollywood all of a sudden, and those are two. I loved in Blade Runner 2049 where they go in and it's the holographic King performing in Elvis. So he doesn't go away. Elvis, I mean, my God, he was a superstar, and I don't know how many records he sold, and everybody, for me at least, there's always, I mean, I like a lot of his songs. I've always been a big Elvis fan, some more than others, of course. Suspicious Minds was always one of my favorites. Burning Love, his latest Flame, that's a good one. But no, I mean, Elvis is, an interesting character, to say the least. And like I said, the solar imagery, the iconography that surrounds him is just really startling and uncanny. And again, it just can't be rationally explained. It's definitely, emerging from the world of the supernatural.
Yeah, it was, that was a chapter that gave me a whole deeper meaning, appreciation of Elvis, and I think you just brought all your legal training and research and lawyer analytical skills to that one. I just that was the chapter that just appealed to me the most. But then we could kind of move into a little bit more seasonal topics like Frankenstein, or the robot from Metropolis that is on the cover of Cinema Symbolism III.
Sure.
Michael Myers, and I also noticed, where was it? On let me help if I turn the page. There it is. I was reading on page 288 where you're listing some of these mystics and out like Agrippa, Bruno, Michael Meyer, 1568 to 1622.
Yeah, no relation to the horror character.
Okay, yeah, that was my one of my questions was, what was the Halloween character based on the alchemist Michael Meyer?
No, none whatsoever.
Okay, no, I just wanted to, but we can look at maybe They Live, Pet Cemetery as some of these like AI reanimation, soulless human type characters. That might be a topic where you could link a whole bunch of some of our favorite movies and go into how the golem character from Jewish folklore is like a template for all those characters.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's when you're dealing with the idea of, I mean, there's different things that, they're not all uniform. You have the Kabbalistic golem, an inanimate, it's inanimate, and then it's brought to life and acts like a human. So this would be like Frankenstein's monster is probably the most famous example. Frosty the Snowman, Smurfette, Roy Batty. I mean, these are all, your Kabbalistic golems. These run parallel with something that comes out of the Hermetica. This is in the Latin Asclepius called, the statue making. That man can make statues and animate them and do whatever he wants with them. So the Kabbalistic golem and the Hermetic statue, run parallel. Then you have things like the mummy, which is, a dead person who's brought back to life, reanimated and brought back to life. Then you have the somnambulist, which is the opposite, which is a human being who's rendered dead. And he's just walking around sleepwalking. So yeah, I mean, you get into these, these creatures that are very popular. Roy Batty from Blade Runner to the Frankenstein's monster. I mean, all these, the artificial intelligence. This is nothing new. This comes out of Judeo-Christian Hermeticism, as it were. It goes back to the golem, which is the lump of clay fashioned, into a human, brought to life by Jewish magic, numbers, gematria, things like that. And again, this runs parallel with the Hermetic statue, which is mentioned in the Latin Asclepius. So, and again, this is, you'll find this, this stuff, what I talk about is, it predates Hollywood. Hollywood is just the latest iteration of this stuff. But, you'll find, like I said, it's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I mean, the book obviously predates the movie substantially. You'll find this echoed in the works, of Edgar Allan Poe with things like The Tomb of Ligeia, works like that.
That's a good point,
yeah. So, I mean, these characters, the artificial intelligence characters, the Frankenstein's monster, the golem, the statue, these have their origins way, way, way back in time. And you're dealing with mystical doctrines such as Kabbalah and, things coming out of the world of Hermeticism. So, it's a powerful force that Hollywood taps into. But again, and it's a point that I always find myself making is this material predates Hollywood. Hollywood just happens to be the latest iteration of it, but it's stuff that predates Hollywood. And just real quick to wrap up, the character of Michael Myers, the name Michael Myers is actually he's named after a friend of John Carpenter. I forget, he was like a movie producer or a financier of Halloween. That's where Michael Myers gets his name from. The Rosicrucian alchemist has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Halloween has so many of those really interesting. The
whole Halloween movie, Halloween Part 1, is a Freudian nightmare. I mean that's what it is from start to finish. Where the kid sees, from the beginning to the end of it, the little boy at the very beginning, I'm talking about the very first Halloween movie, the one from 1978. The kid is spying on his sister and her boyfriend screwing around, and the boyfriend puts on the clown mask and then takes the girl upstairs, and we'll keep it family friendly, but you know what happens. So what's the little kid do, Michael Myers do? He puts on the clown mask, and then he takes his phallic knife and does what the boyfriend does, and he confuses the knife with the sex act and stabs the sister to death with it. And this is what he does the whole rest of the movie. It's a Freudian, dystopian nightmare that this guy is living in. Michael Myers, the killer, who is completely rewired in his brain to confuse the sex act with the stabbing, the phallic knife. So the whole Halloween movie, the first one, is basically this Freudian sexual nightmare that is being presented. And then it even gets worse. And I'll keep it family friendly. I won't get into it, but it actually becomes worse with the Jamie Lee Curtis character. She gets involved with this. She also has this Freudian collapse this Freudian sexual collapse at the end of the movie. So really, the way to analyze the first Halloween movie is to understand that this is dealing with the underlying theme in this thing is this Freudian dark sexual confusion that is being experienced by both Michael Myers and then, of course, if you want to assume part two is canon, Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode is his sister. So, I mean, you have this, sort of incestuous, sexual Freudian storyline going on that's probably more scary and evil, sinister, and revolting than the murders going on the screen. When you look at the psychology of it, Halloween, I think is a fantastic movie. It's one of probably my favorite horror movies of all time. But there really is, this really dark sexual Freudian undercurrent with it that's very disturbing.
I think you just profiled Michael Myers very well, just what kind of killer he is. Just he can't tell the difference between sex and killing. And
exactly. No, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, he's, the stabbing is the sex act for him, and it's the thrusting of the phallic object. And like I said, it's very dark and very disturbing and very Freudian. But I really like the first Halloween movie. There's a lot going on in it. It's very archetypal. I think it appeals to a lot of people because it could be anywhere USA. The story is very good. I've known this for a while. I'm not going to mention the William Shatner mask. That's too well fleshed out. I've covered that a million times. No, but everyone knows that now. But if you watch it, if you've watched it on TV, it's hard to see. But if you have like the Blu-ray disc of it, it stands out. And I've known this for a while, but people are just beginning to pick up on this now. And it's the scene where Donald Pleasance, who is Loomis, and of course Sam Loomis is the boyfriend in Psycho. I don't know if people are aware of this. A lot, the whole thing is. Yeah, the whole thing is based on, is an homage to Psycho, Hitchcock's Psycho. And Sam Loomis, Donald Pleasance's character, is named after the boyfriend in Psycho, Sam Loomis. And, of course, the nurse he's hanging around with is named Marion. And, of course, Sam Loomis's girlfriend in Psycho is Marion Crane.
And Janet Leigh is...
Of course, right, is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother.
Mom, yeah.
Right, but when Loomis is talking to Charles Cypher, who is... Sheriff Brackett at the hardware store, Michael Myers is sitting right behind him in the car. You can see him with the mask on and everything. He's shadowing Loomis, and he's at a traffic light, and you'll see him sitting there. Now, if you don't have it on the wide screen or on the Blu-ray, sometimes it gets cut off. Especially, this was true in the 70s and 80s when they aired it on TV. You couldn't see it, but if you get the widescreen Blu-ray, Michael Myers is sitting there right there in the car shadowing him. And I've known about it for a while, but someone was pointing, for the first time I didn't realize I was like, oh, yeah, Michael Myers is shadowing him. So that's always a fun thing to look for. But Halloween, of course, the first one, the immortal classic, as they say in part 3. Yeah, I mean, it really encapsulates. I mean, if you ask me to name 2 or 3 movies that encapsulate Samhain better than any other, that would be one of them. Trick or Treat would be another one. That's an absolutely fantastic Halloween movie that I absolutely love. So yeah, I mean, great Halloween movies, great movies to watch this time of the year. No doubt about it.
Okay, so your the Michael's difficulty in distinguishing between sex and death reminds me of like Full Metal Jacket and Doctor Strangelove. So, we can kind of make a little segue into some of the dualities in The Shining, and maybe back up to go into Rosemary's Baby. And, we can make a connection there with, Roman Polanski and Jack Nicholson. So if I haven't confused the audience too much with all these connections,
but you can't draw too many connections from there. Everyone in Hollywood knows everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, and just because Polanski knew Nicholson, I mean, that doesn't link him to The Shining or anything like that. Polanski was well out of the picture by the time The Shining was made. But what I would say about...
I was just thinking, like, Chinatown.
Well, like with The Shining, this is a movie now that is being referenced all over the place. I mean, and this is sort of the... sort of like the quintessential now haunted house movie, and this they reference this all over the place now. I mean, in the one movie that came out, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, there's a Shining reference where the one woman is at the end of the hallway, coming out of the red room, red rum, and then you have, and then the biggest one of all is The Conjuring 2. James Wan, who has said that The Shining is one of his favorite movies, and of course The Conjuring 2 is a haunted house movie, I mean, which is what The Shining is, of course, one of the ultimate haunted house movies. And not only do you have Valak there standing at the end of the hallway in The Conjuring Part 2, which is of course a replication of the Grady twins, but the wallpaper is the same. The wallpaper in The Conjuring 2 in Lorraine and Ed's house is the same from the hallway in The Shining. And then he takes it one step further. That's not good enough. So let's just put Stanley Kubrick in the movie. And if you watch The Conjuring 2, the seance scene at the very beginning of it at the Amityville house has the Kubrick lookalike sitting there at the seance table. And it's Kubrick as he looked on the set of The Shining. So that's just wonderful. That's just a wonderful Stanley Kubrick referencing there. And again, it's contextual. When you're dealing with a haunted house movie, think of The Shining. This is the one they're turning to. In part 2 of the cinema book, part 2 of the cinema book, in Cinema Symbolism II, the one movie I broke down, someone was asking me about this on another show, was Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, which is literally a frame-by-frame remake of The Shining. And I get into all the parallels between The Shining and Crimson Peak, and that's if you like the Elvis stuff, that one's just as astounding. So I mean Kubrick. Kubrick is one of those grandmaster characters. Certainly, The Shining is an appropriate movie for this time of the year, of course. Halloween, The Shining, great horror film. And yeah, I mean Kubrick is an expert at this material. He's one of these guys like Darren Aronofsky or Ari Aster, or James Wan even, who understands the material. He knows when to use it. He knows when not to use it. He knows when to use certain things and when to hold back certain things. John Carpenter is another one. No question about it. We could throw him into that mix. And that's what I always, I'm harping on more than anything else when I write these books, and the point I'm trying to make, when I do these shows is, there's no uniformity to it. I mean, one of the things, of course, I've been on countless shows, including this one talking about Freemasonry, and it's one of the oldest tenets, and it comes out of the world of Freemasonry, and that is when you're dealing with symbolism, there's always more than one interpretation. There's always more than one. There's always deeper meanings. You have the profane meaning, and then you have multiple esoteric meanings. Oh, the same is true for the movies. Just because you see a symbol in one movie Do not assume that that symbolism applies to it as it is being used in another movie. You always, and I stress this, I try to stress this all the time, is you have to look at the contextual placement of the symbol or the icon or the theme or the undercurrent, because it appearing in one may have a different meaning in another. And that to me is really one of the keys to deciphering this material, is being able to apply the multi-layer of symbolism here, but not here, but here, but it's this interpretation here, but not here, but this interpretation there. That's when you can really start seeing what's going on. And that's one of the reasons why I like Kubrick so much, is he knows when to use the symbolism properly, and he knows when to pull back from it. He uses lots of duality, as you said, repetition in The Shining, but not so much in Eyes Wide Shut. And there's a reason for that. It's because The Shining is all about reincarnation and rebirth and regeneration, and the same thing happening over and over and over again. Hen to pan, it's the Ouroboros. This is, of course, not the theme in Eyes Wide Shut. So that to me is always one of the hallmarks of an expert filmmaker, is when they can apply it in one movie, but then not apply it in another, but go in another direction, in that movie. And James Wan, again, you look at The Conjuring parts 1 and 2, which are the haunted house movies, but then when he goes to part 3, which is more about demonic possession and not a haunted house movie, well, then he backs off the Kubrick Shining references. And I thought, that's when you get into more the Exorcist material and things like that. So, that to me is always the hallmark of an expert filmmaker, is knowing when to use it and knowing the context to use it in and applying it properly.
Yeah, with The Shining, you've covered the Grady twins, the little reference to Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine.
Oh, there's hundreds of them, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he uses repetitive tropes and doubles all over the place. Kubrick does in that movie, and it's to convey to the subconscious mind the notion that the Overlook Hotel is a serpent biting its tail, that it never ends, that it's this endless reincarnation cycle that is constantly reoccurring. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have my book in front of me. I'm sitting here. I'm just got the TV on. I got the lights off. But, just off the top of my head. Are you
scaring yourself?
No, I've got on TV, but I've got it on mute. But, I got my dog sleeping here next to me, and I don't want to bother with too many bright lights. I got the computer on, of course. So, no, that's enough. I'm good. No, not okay. Scared or anything like that. No, Rosie here, my Chihuahua, is my guard dog. She keeps everything safe and, protects the house. But, Kubrick, repetition, so like as you were saying, there's one set of twins wouldn't be enough, so we have two sets of twins. We have the Grady twins, of course, everyone knows, and we have the two girls who are leaving, passed by Allman when he's showing Jack his apartment. You have the two adult twins who pass Allman
at the beginning of the movie.
Correct. Right. This is when Allman is showing Jack and Wendy their apartment inside the Overlook. I mean, you mentioned the two Portlands mentioned. We have in his what are there, 210s and 220s. Yeah, I mean the number 12 repeats. There's when they go into the hedge maze, Wendy and Danny take 12 turns. Jack throws the ball against the wall 12 times. He hits the door with the axe 12 times. I mean, there's repetition, all over the place. Things repeating itself at the beginning, then at the end. I can't remember. I to be honest with you, when I was doing, I pointed all these out. It's funny you mentioned this, and I don't have a problem saying this, but I talk about this in Cinema Symbolism too. And when I was making the rounds for that book, and when I talked about the repetition, the signing, it's so extensive. I actually had a chart in front of me that I'd have to read off of. or refresh my memory because there's so many of them.
Right.
And I just can't remember them all off the top of my head. It's like the stuff with Crimson Peak. I was doing another show, and someone was asking me about that, and I actually got the book down off the shelf because I had to read off some of them. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, The Shining is just an expert example of repetition, repetitive tropes. Yeah, I mean, and Kubrick, and it's not a coincidence. I mean, it is no question intentional.
So what? Okay, so in The Shining we have all this repetition that shows that, goes back to the line with Jack and Philip Stone in the bathroom where Philip says, you've always been the caretaker. That sets up the reincarnation theme. But how is something like Eyes Wide Shut different in, you're still dealing with maybe some of these esoteric themes, but Kubrick's taking us in a different direction with similar themes. What's your analysis there of Eyes Wide Shut?
Right. I wouldn't say it's really similar themes. It's kind of a different movie, and that's why it makes Kubrick so great at this, is because he gives you something different with Eyes Wide Shut than he gives you in The Shining. And Eyes Wide Shut is one of those. This last film, it's Kubrick's swan song. But again, one of the things that Kubrick does in that film, that it really stands out is the use of the Christmas lights. And the whole movie is just, until they get to the mansion, the whole movie is surrounding the ills of humankind with these Christmas lights, whether it be child trafficking, child pornography, alcoholism, pornography, prostitution, drug abuse. They're all intertwined with these Christmas lights. And it's not the little white ones. It's the big, bright, colorful ones, that are purple, red, green, blue, yellow, what have you. And Kubrick is doing that on purpose, because then when you get to the Illuminati, mansion, with Red Cloak, and that's another one that he does when he makes the magic circle. He casts at Widdershins, which is counterclockwise. That's, of course, black magic. When he gets there, there's no Christmas lights. And what Kubrick is trying to show you in that, in that instance, contextually, is, this is where the real evil is. That the stuff I've been showing you up until now is, this is where the stuff I've been surrounding with the Christmas lights is trivial as compared to the stuff going on that these guys are into. So that's sort of what one of the things Kubrick, is doing in Eyes Wide Shut. And again, even Kubrick, the one thing that I don't think, I kind of point this out is, I think he does it just because he can't help himself. I just don't think he can help himself to use repetition. And I think it's almost he just does it just to do it, or just does it just to just to incorporate it. I mean, in Eyes Wide Shut, you have the repetitive trope of the magic circle, where it's being it turns up in the mansion, and then at the very end, where they're in FAO Schwartz, you see the game, Magic Circle. I think it's a magic trick game, sitting there that the little girl walks by. And, of course, Nicole Kidman ends the movie on this very explicit sexual connotation. I'll keep it family-friendly, of course. And, again, this is kind of hearkening back to the carnality, witnessed in the Summertown, mansion, the Illuminati mansion. And you'll find this again in what you mentioned with, like Full Metal Jacket. Again, it's not anything like The Shining, but it just seems like Kubrick just can't help himself, no matter what, to just throw in a little like his calling card almost, where you have at the beginning of the movie, well, the first half of the movie, in Full Metal Jacket, where the Paris Island sequence ends, with a reference to Mickey Mouse, where Hartman is shot in the head by Gomer Pyle. There's a Mickey Mouse reference. And then, of course, you fast forward to the end of the movie. This is the second half when they're in Vietnam, and they're all singing the Mickey Mouse theme song, which, again, harkens back to the end of the first half of the movie, back to the Paris Island sequence. So, it's like Kubrick just can't help himself with it. And, again, I can't say it enough. When you're dealing with Stanley Kubrick, you are dealing with one of these expert, grand masters of this stuff. So, when I watch something like The Shining and I see something new, or I see something hidden, or I see something new that's repeated, this doesn't come as a surprise to me.
Yeah, and while I was looking for something in your book, I did come across this start of a chapter with Elvis's Suspicious Minds that introduces Blade Runner.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, you said something about the song Suspicious Minds was in a movie, and I was trying to find.
It's in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
When Kay and Deckard are shooting at each other in the Las Vegas nightclub, there's a holographic Elvis singing "Suspicious Minds," which is appropriate because it's what their mindset is, because they're suspicious of one another. And then it turns up again in a movie that came out this year. It's the Conjuring 3. The Devil Made Me Do It, and it's more subtle in the Blade Runner movie than it is in The Devil Made Me Do It, because she points it out. Lorraine Warren is a psychic who can detect criminals, and she's being driven by a police officer to a crime scene, and he's skeptical of her. And the song on the radio that's being played is Elvis's Suspicious Minds, and she makes the comment. She actually says it point blank. She says this song is something, I'm not quoting the movie verbatim, but she makes a comment, something to the effect of, this song is appropriate because it's your mindset. You're suspicious of me. And he says something, they make a joke about it. He says, yeah, you're right. And then he makes a joke to her. I'm just doing this off of my head. I have the movie here on Blu-ray. It's a good movie. He makes a joke to her. He's like, have you seen Elvis? Did you see? No. She says, I saw Elvis. And then he jokes to her. He says, alive or dead? And her answer is both. So if you check that out, that's in the Conjuring Part 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. I love those movies. All three of the Conjuring movies are great. I love these are ones that are on the slate for CS4 because they're overloaded with stuff. The Annabelle movies I like. I like The Nun, and I like The Curse of La Llorona also. So, if you like studio horror, I think those movies do a great job, bringing back, studio horror films. I liked all three of the Conjuring movies. Part 2 was probably my favorite. But I liked all the Annabelle movies. I like The Nun, and I like La Llorona. So if you're into horror, it is Halloween. By all means, check out the Conjureverse films.
Okay. So, let's get into that scene in Rosemary's Baby with Notre Dame on fire.
Right. Well, it's actually in the book. It's actually what I said was what I get into in one of the themes in the book is, how movies can be prophetic. Mm-hmm. And this comes out of the world of these Christian mystics like Emanuel Swedenborg and people like that. And this comes out of the world of Plato, that the creative act is a divine act, and you're tapping into this ethereal undercurrent. And you will find over and over again that movies can be prophetic. Then, of course, whenever it was in 2019, I think Notre Dame Cathedral caught on fire in France, And you go back to Rosemary's Baby, this very demonic film, and there's the painting on the wall of the church on fire. And it looks very similar to Notre Dame. If you read the book, and I made sure I put this in there, if you read Rosemary's Baby, the actual church, the painting of the church is St. Patrick's in New York City. But you can't help. But when you see it, think of the Notre Dame. And I always thought that the painting looked more like Notre Dame than it did St. Patrick's. But this is just one of those examples. There are many of them of movies serving as prophecy. And again, when I look at this, the more I look at it again, and this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier with Elvis. To me, at any rate, this seems supernatural. This seems to me, to be coming out of the world of the supernatural. I mean, especially the stuff surrounding 9/11 and the lead up to the event. That's too astounding, and I don't believe there's a human hand behind that. It's all the 9/11 imagery that appears, in the 3-4 year period prior to the, day of 9/11 is just remarkable. It's astounding, and it just can't be explained rationally. And because of that, I believe it's, flirts, comes out of this supernatural world. I can't explain it other than to say that.
There's the Simpsons. What was the?
There's the Simpsons episode. There's Fight Club.
Yes. There are some of those September 11th predictions, and you are presenting in Cinema Symbolism III. How does Hollywood have this crystal ball type?
Well, I don't think they do. I mean, again, I think
it's a foreknowledge. It almost seems like.
I disagree. No, I disagree.
Okay.
I think it's turning up. There's no one planting that stuff in there. It's turning up through some sort of supernatural act of creation.
Oh, okay.
And it ties into Plato. Plato talked about this. The Greek philosopher, he said, the act of creating is divine. And this is echoed in the Hermetica. Creation is a divine act. And of course, what is a movie? It's a creation. And the idea is, and this is what guys like Emanuel Schwettenborg talked about, it's, this act of creating is, and again, it ties into Carl Jung. I mean, I'm not convinced in any way, shape, or form there's Hollywood producers saying, well, we have foreknowledge that there's going to be planes flown into a building. Let's put clues in our movies. That, to me, sounds pretty ridiculous. But but it's there nonetheless. So how is it getting there? I mean, how is this imagery turning up? And it ties into the world of Plato and Carl Jung of the collective unconscious, that the idea of creation is this divine act, and you're tapping into this ethereal realm. And because of that, you are subconsciously including, whether you like it or not, prophecy. Your film is becoming this prophetic device. What makes this so interesting with the 9/11 material, not all of it, like you mentioned, The Simpsons and The Patriot with Mel Gibson would be two, kind of examples of 9/11 imagery, but it doesn't really fit the mainframe, is the imagery. Well, and this is what is really bizarre about it more than anything else, is the main imagery relating to 9/11 prior to the event is all coming out of these Gnostic films that hit at the turn of the last century. And why is that? I mean, why is it that there was this slate of Gnostic films of coming to consciousness, of awakening, of spiritual enlightenment, and it's all the movies that I've talked about a million times, The Matrix, Dark City, Truman Show, Fight Club, Donnie Darko, Vanilla Sky, Existenz. It's this slate of Gnostic films that all came out from around 1997 to 2001 at the end of the millennium. You could call it Pisces to Aquarius, what have you, that all involve this Gnostic reawakening. and this is where a lot of the 9/11 imagery comes out of. So, I mean, you have this, it's psychological. It's, it's completely subconscious. It's like the holidays. I mean, it's the microcosm reacting to the macrocosm. It's as above, so below. Why is Halloween celebrated when it is? Why is it that, pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns festoon porches on October 31st, in horror movies, and kids dress up trick-or-treating? You wouldn't do any of this on July 31st. Does anyone want to listen to Christmas music and drink eggnog on May 25th? Of course it's not. This is all psychological. This is the macrocosm affecting the microcosm. This is as above, so below, and it's psychological. It's the the macrocosm affecting the microcosm. It's the death of the sun. It's the Earth moving around the sun. Well, the sun dies on October 31st, the halfway point between the equinox, the autumn equinox, and the winter solstice. This is the exaltation of the death of the sun. This is why kids dress up in costumes and go trick-or-treating to keep the evil spirits away. December 25th, the big celebration. The sun is reborn. When the days start getting longer again. This is all, the Easter, the celebration of the sun emerging from the tomb of winter. This is all psychological. This is all the macrocosm expecting the microcosm. And it's the same thing with these movies, with these films. It's the turn of the millennium. It's the end of the old age, the start of the new one. And you have this slate of Gnostic films, but then what makes it a double whammy is you got this 9/11 imagery in them. And again, I don't think it's intentional. I don't think Hollywood has a crystal ball. I think, again, it's completely supernatural. And I think, in my opinion, at least my take on it, is because I believe it to be supernatural, I think that makes it much more interesting, at least in my opinion. But, it's there. I'm not denying it. I wouldn't even dream of denying it. I mean, it's well beyond a coincidence, the 9/11 imagery in film, and then you have to try to account for it. And that's the best explanation I can give you. I don't really, I think it's kind of ridiculous to think, that Hollywood, had foreknowledge of this. I don't buy that. Now, Hollywood does work with the government to plant things in films. That's documented. I mean,
Right.
Clearly you look at the, Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce, Sherlock Holmes movies by Universal. The first couple were completely war propaganda. Yankee Doodle Dandy, the railgun appearing in the one Transformer movie was intentional. So, the government does get involved. Yeah, The Exorcist, sure, with Blatty, with the CIA, of course. So, you can get involvement, but I don't think that's the case with the 9/11 stuff. I think again, you're delving into the world of the supernatural with that one. Just my opinion.
No, that makes sense. Rob, did you want to get a drink of water?
Yeah, so let's see here. Yeah, we're right. We're at the top of the hour, so let's take a break.
Okay.
10 minutes of work, and then we'll finish up.
Okay. Yeah, I'll talk with Barbara. I just I didn't want to start into something.
I didn't know if you want to put music on, or if you wanted to talk to Barbara, or I can put it on mute. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I can give my website real quick if you want, although you got a link to the page.
I give the listeners your website and get a drink of water, and Barbara and I will talk for a few minutes.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Mark. Of course, that wraps up the first hour. My website is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV, so my website is just that, Robert W. Sullivan IV, the letter I, the letter V.com, robertwsullivan.iv.com. Check it out. It's a very easy site to navigate. Links to buy the books, information about me, of course, information about upcoming shows I'm going to do, such as this one. So yeah, if you're interested, and of course there's links there to buy the books. They're available in all the major online retailers, Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble. You get the ebook or the print edition, that's no problem. Again, my website is my name, robertwsullivaniv.com. And with that, I will put the microphone on mute.
Okay.
I will take a 10-minute break, and I will be back in a little while, and we'll finish up with another, like I said, half hour, 40 minutes or so.
Okay.
Yep. I'll be back.
Okay. Okay. Get a few extra ice cubes in there to hold you over for the next few minutes. But Barbara, one of the nice things about Rob's books is it gives you these very clear definitions of these ideas from way back in time. And like here's an example. We're talking about Michael Myers or Frankenstein as golems, and he defines the term as the golem is a creature, particularly a human being, made in an artificial way by virtue of a magic act through the use of holy names. The idea that it is possible to create living beings in this manner is widespread in the magic of many people. Especially well known are the idols and images to which ancients claim to have given the power of speech, and etc. Okay, and Rob, in the chapters where he devotes a lot of space to these concepts, or just has a paragraph devoted to just one golem-like character from another movie. It really does make a lot of sense that these characters really are rooted in antiquity, almost like Adam and Eve are basically like created out of clay, Adam's created out of clay and comes to life, and basically the same thing. But Rob has this really interesting knack of pointing out a character like the beloved Frosty the Snowman. It's basically the same but it's the same kind of concept as Michael Myers or Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster.
He actually ruined movies for me in one way, because he and anybody who's going to read Rob's books, I highly recommend, excuse me, personally, that you start with 1 and then go through 2 and then 3. He hands out archetypes, and then suddenly you're looking at the movies and with a whole other set of eyes. You're recognizing archetypes. Yeah. You're recognizing how they're using the scenery to give you a subliminal message as to the fact that something is going to happen, or that this is a negative or a happy place. And it's in a lot of cases in 1 and 2, I had not only seen the movie, but I'd read the book as well, and it made it far more. I think reading the book, you pick up for me, I pick up the symbology faster reading the book than I do actually watching the movie. And he has a way of showing how these archetypes are in our lives, and therefore you take a look at some of the relationships you have and things like that, and you understand that there are people are playing archetypes in your life, and kind of understand. He said stuff was supernatural, and I believe that a lot of the archetypes that are in these movies are not intentionally put there, but they're there to remind us of concepts within our own lives that we can watch for, look at, and utilize. And with the golem, that word to me is so reminiscent of course, Lord of the Rings with
right.
the golem.
Golem.
The golem, and while it was not it was a person that had gone through such a change that in a way it had been created by the atmosphere that it was in. And, you tend to then, there is a carryover subconsciously within our lives when you have this kind of information, that information is then utilized within your own reality, which is fascinating. At least it was.
I think Rob does an excellent job of bringing his legal training, of digging deeper, looking at all the evidence to really flesh out the meanings of the characters and stories, all these different themes throughout a movie or in a director's and throughout his whole career. And
I asked him once if directors and authors were aware of what they were doing when they put these archetypes in, or these graphic situations that are going to send a message to your subconscious. And he said he really didn't think that, in some cases they did, but in many cases they didn't. And I think it was brilliant for him to pick up on all of this information. And when you think of how many times he has to watch these dang movies in order to get all this information out of it, it's got to be 10, 20, 30, 40 times he's got to go through to catch all the nuances. It's enough to make one crazy. And of course, I have two movies that have been on my list for him to analyze for years now, and I wanted him to do Interstellar, and I wanted him to do Avatar. I felt Avatar especially has all the makings of those kinds of situations. I would be fascinated to hear at some point in time. He'll get to it eventually, I'm sure, this life or next. But I would dearly love to hear what he has to say about Avatar. Have you seen that one?
I have not.
Mark, how could you not?
I was busy. Reading for whatever show was that week.
That's what you're getting for Christmas.
The Blu-ray version of Avatar.
Yep, it'll come right at you.
Okay. Well,
it's
another movie, Rob. Three. Sorry about the sometimes it's a little hard reading the introductory pages when they're written in Roman numerals. So,
Sanskrit, huh?
Yes, but one in Cinema Symbolism II, Rob does talk a little, has a little bit of information on the Umberto Eco's book, The Name of the Rose, and it also became a very popular movie with Sean Connery in it came out in the early 80s. But and also on the same page, Rob also wrote, furthermore, in Cinema Symbolism, the first book I'm reading out of part 2, this author identified the similarities between Papa Smurf and Karl Marx, and that the Smurfs symbolize the perfect socialist Marxist society.
All right, I'm back, Mark.
Okay, since they all work without pay, wear identical outfits, and live rent-free in generic uniform housing. Okay, most people aren't going to make the connection between Karl Marx and the Smurfs. But, Rob's insights into some of these characters or situations in his books does make some really excellent points, gives you new insights, that kind of thing. And that's why I have really enjoyed reading Rob's books, learning what people were thinking maybe 5,000 years ago, how these ideas may have remained constant, changed over the millennia, but Rob really does a lot of research to make these different philosophies available to the readers. Rob has a writing style that makes it understandable to put yourself into the way some of these people developed philosophies back in antiquity. Okay, so I'm done with my rant now. So, Rob, since you do have the robots on the cover of Cinema Symbolism III, you do. That's one of my favorite movies, anyways. But you also do get into the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and when Miguel was a guest with us, in the late spring, he's talking about all the archons keeping people asleep. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari does seem to kind of get into that mind control idea. You also look at Jacob's Ladder, which is a far more recent movie, but that also explores like the MK Ultra program. So back in 1919, when the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari came out, and Jacob's Ladder with Tim Robbins in the 85 or so when that came out. how do we see this mind control topic being developed throughout cinematic history?
I mean, the Jacob's Ladder movie was just basically documenting what the CIA did, which was the MK Ultra. That movie, Jacob's Ladder, is sort of the forerunner of The Sixth Sense, which, you know, it has the twist ending on it.
Right.
I never saw...
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, I never saw Jacob's Ladder in the theater, and I saw The Sixth Sense before I saw Jacob's Ladder. I saw Sixth Sense in the theater, and it wasn't probably until about 5 years later, until about 04, 05, somewhere in there, that I finally got around to seeing Jacob's Ladder. I think Jacob's Ladder came out in November of 1990. And, you know, it's like, whoa, because, you know, you will completely see where The Sixth Sense got its idea from. I mean, it's you know, but no, they get into... The Jacob's Ladder gets into the thing. They use the CIA mind control element to, to throw doubt on to this guy's situation. Is he hallucinating this stuff, or you know, what are these things he's seeing? You know, is it a product of this you know, mind control experiment? You know, they tie it into like Agent Orange, also at Vietnam. You know, is he having some sort of these hallucinations that he's experiencing tied into this experiment that was done on him while he was in Vietnam? You know, or is it something else? Well, we come to find out it's something else. You know, it's not that. You know, it's something else. Of course, you know, I guess I give the spoiler away. He's dead, and what he's seeing are demons, quite literally. You know, and if you listen to the DiNardo speech, when you know that one line that he says, "This is the Danny Aiello character," he tells him right then and there what's going on. You know, I mean, he explains to him the whole situation. So, yeah, I mean, Jacob's Ladder is a great film. That's Adrian Lyne. He's very esoteric. He maybe not as much as Kubrick or Aronofsky, but his movies always have stuff going on in them. The Somnambulist is the opposite of the Mummy. You know, the Mummy is the human brought back to life. The Somnambulist is the human rendered dead. And that's the first movie. You know, I guess the more parallel I would see with them is it's the movie, the Cabinet of Caligari is the movie with the first twist ending. The unreliable narrator, and you know, the one thing that's astounding that I really liked was how much Joker pays homage to that movie, and there's a reason why, of course, and the reason is because Caesar, the somnambulist, is Conrad Veidt, and who's he? Well, he's the guy who was in The Man Who Laughs. What's that? Well, that's Bob Kane's inspiration for the Joker. And of course, if you're familiar with Caligari, it has the false narrator, twist ending. And of course, if you watch Joker with Todd Phillips, you know, what's that? Well, it's the twist ending, and it's the same one. They're in the institution at the end. It's the false narrator. That is a complete reference to Caligari and Conrad Veidt, who of course is the physical appearance of the Joker. So I thought that was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, you know, I loved how Todd Phillips' Joker went all the way back in time to reference Caligari. That was fantastic. And I was, I think I told you this off air. I mentioned it briefly on other shows as well. I had Caligari in there, and then this was early January of 2020, I saw Midsommar and Joker, and I was so impressed with those that I decided to incorporate them in CS3, and I'm glad I did. It slowed the publication of the book down, but, you know, that's fine. And I think it's good because I think it works better because having Joker in the same book as Caligari, I think, is important because those two movies are interlinked through Conrad Veidt and the twist ending with the false narrator. So, yeah, I mean, you know, those movies are not lost on modern-day Hollywood.
Yeah. You really do have a wide variety of movies you're covering in your books. And like you just mentioned, Midsommar, it is a newer movie. Including these new directors who really caught your eye. You aren't you weren't limiting yourself to between this date and this date. You are providing a comprehensive view of so many of these movies that are linked some way through solar imagery. You do a commendable job of keeping the movies that you're putting in your books current.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, I analyze movies that feature these undercurrents, these occult undercurrents and themes. That's number one. If the movie doesn't have it, and it doesn't make them bad movies, that I don't talk about it, per se. I've never in any one of my books, 1, 2, or 3, analyzed a Quentin Tarantino movie. Just simply because the movies are devoid of anything worthy to talk about, I believe, on an esoteric level. I like the movies. I like Pulp Fiction. I like Reservoir Dogs. I think his most recent ones have been big disappointments, but that's just me. Not a fan of his more recent films, but I do like Pulp Fiction. I do like Reservoir Dogs. Beyond that, not so much. But so that's number one. Is it has to be present. And I have always tried to keep it a wide variety, and I do span the time frames because it does. I mean, you'll find it in movies from the very beginning of Hollywood all the way up to modern day. And you'll find that, I've mentioned this on other shows, probably I've talked to you about it, and I know it's in the books. This predates Hollywood. Hollywood is just the latest vehicle of it. I mean, you will find this imagery in the works of the 19th century, American Renaissance authors, such as Edgar Allan Poe and Herman Melville and Emily Dickinson and people like that. You'll find it in the works of Richard Wagner, the Ring Cycle operas. You'll find it in the works of Mozart. You most certainly will find it in the works of William Shakespeare. You were mentioning about Papa Smurf being Karl Marx. The personification of political figures is nothing new. The Wizard of Oz is William McKinley. Doc Brown in the Back to the Future movies is Ronald Reagan. In Shakespeare, Prospero is John Dee. Barone is Giordano Bruno. So again, nothing new. The one thing that the one movie we were talking about is I just started outlining CS4. This is still a ways off. Was the one movie that is most recent that I just watched. I have it here is Cruella. Lots going on in that one as well. And the one thing that I've noticed, I think me personally, I don't want to pat myself on the back. The pointing out of Easter eggs and talking about this stuff has become a cottage industry. When I first started doing this back in 2012 with the Royal Arch, which was really, the first book that I talked about it, this was something that was in its infancy. 9-10 years later, now this is a cottage industry on YouTube. I personally think I have a better knack for it than anyone else. That's why I continue to do it. So I am going to do a CS4. But almost the reason I point that out is, like I said, I'm not trying to toot my own whistle, but just, me personally, I've watched some of the videos, and I think they miss a lot of stuff that's going on. They pick up on some, but not a lot, not all of it. But the one thing that I have noticed of late is it's almost a case of Hollywood, with this material. It's almost like the what's the old expression? The tail wagging, the dog wagging the tail wagging the dog. That's it. Where it's become such a cottage industry that now Hollywood is more cognizant of it and and doing it more purposefully, as it were. Where in the past, up until the last 10 years, it was more subtle and more maybe under the table. Now it's more, in your face with it, where the Easter eggs are probably maybe more a little obvious, than they would have been in the past. For example, I'll say something and then I'll leave something alone. The one movie that I was just mentioning, Cruella, this is the one that came out back in the summer, with Emma Stone. This is the Disney villain origin movie, which I did like. I did like the movie. There's some Easter eggs in that are very obvious, and especially if you see 101 Dalmatians, it's very easy to pick up on. There is an undercurrent on it that is very, very well hidden. I'm not going to say what it is. It will be in part 4, but it is almost next to impossible to pick up on, and it requires something else, which it requires familiarity with something else that I have a little of, but not a whole lot. And I'll probably have to try to familiarize myself with this topic before delving into Cruella. But it's there. It's definitely there. So, like I said, it's the one thing I've noticed more recently is it seems more the Easter eggs and the undercurrents are maybe more a little obvious than they were in the past. And I think that's because Hollywood is, like I said, is kind of reacting to this sort of budgeting cottage industry, of placing these esoteric undercurrents and themes and symbols and characters in films. So it's there, and it's there, Mark, and, it spans all of Hollywood and it predates Hollywood. So, it continues, as it were.
Yeah. You're talking about predating Hollywood, and I really did like, since I enjoy history and a lot of the themes behind the shows on Nightlight do deal with history. You had a really good section on La Belle Epic. That just got the book started, puts the audience in that time frame and like Paris in the 1870s to start of the First World War. Monet and Manet and those painters are some of the artists you think of from that time. But you did a really excellent job of just kind of explain the art scene in Paris and how it would eventually influence Hollywood. You want to spend like a couple of minutes talking about the importance of that section? That's another chapter I thought you did a terrific job on.
That was that's the introduction of the book. I get into that, and yeah, I mean it is. You definitely get into this sort of occult artistic flavor, with that time frame in Paris, and it certainly carries over into Hollywood. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, that whole era. And you're right, it, runs from about 1870. It's the Third Republic of France, up until World War I. I guess it's pretty much extinguished. I think that's, it's like 1870 to, 1912 or so, that we're talking about. But right at that time, at the end of World War I, is you get the birth of Hollywood. So you definitely get that, transference of that sort of occult artistic vibe, probably more, with guys like, Levy, who's revived, and Pappas and Paladin, and that character, and then you get the act, Sarah Bernhardt, those characters,
Baudelaire.
You could see a parallel of where this was going, as it were. And it kind of, how it was carried on from France basically to California and to Hollywood. I mean, I think it's, I like that too. I thought that portion came out well as well. And you get into the whole thing with, the creative endeavor with Lucifer, with, purloining fire from the abyss, and, the creative spark coming from hellfire, not from above. And, gets, to sort of the dark, aspects of it, with Alaphus Levy and Pappas and those characters. What's his real name? It's, I forget it right now. But at any rate, no, the point I was making with that was, and it's the introduction of the book. It's the, comes right into the preface, was how this sort of vibe in France at the time, in Paris at the time, may have been extinguished by World War I, but it certainly carries on in Hollywood. So yeah, I mean, like I said, if you read the book, you'll stumble upon that right away. And I'm a big history buff myself, and of course, if you're into that, by all means, take a look at the Royal Arch of Enoch, which was my first book, which is really a lot of history and philosophy.
Yeah, it was well done, and I think you see where you do have periods like that where it's like shifting cultural centers, and with the First World War going on in Europe, it ends up in America, and Hollywood's founded by Masons. So
Sure.
you can see how the people establishing a business empire, whatever term you want to use, where some of those early influences really never go away. And I think you make that point, and here it is, 110 years later, and you're pointing out, Midsommar has the same, the most latest movie that you just wrote about, has a connection to early early stages of the development of Hollywood. So I thought, if people are looking for an understanding, read the introduction. You do a terrific job with it. And let's see what. Seeing. Oh, another movie that I don't think we've discussed on all the times you've been on shows where I've hosted. I thought it was a really interesting movie when I saw it, and I just saw it the one time. And I'm glad you have a lengthy section of it in Cinema Symbolism III, but it's Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh yeah, that's a good one with Guillermo. Is another one of these guys who is very adroit, and again, you're dealing with when you're doing fairy tales. That's a fairy tale. You're dealing with what's called the rule of three, which permeates fairy tales. They did a good job of putting in this in that new movie. It came out. Well, new movie came out. Gretel and Hansel incorporated some of this as well. So no, I liked. You got you got some an Alice in Wonderland vibe going on in Pan's Labyrinth. You got the magical element. You've got the Wizard of Oz. element going on in that as well with the red shoes at the end. So yeah, I mean, I like the movie, and it was one that I took on. And I'm a big fan of Guillermo del Toro. Like I said, the one that is just overloaded is Crimson Peak. That one I could talk about. I mean, I could do probably a 5-hour show on that one alone. But no, Pan's Labyrinth was good, and of course, The Shape of Water. Of course, that one's near and dear to me because it takes place in Baltimore. And there are certain things in there that I think you have to be from Baltimore to understand. Well, I mean, I don't say that. I know that. Like, I mean, I know, where he meets the one guy that's obviously supposed to be the Sparrows Point steel mill. The movie theater is obviously supposed to be the Senator movie theater in Govins. But you have to be from Baltimore to pick up on that. So no, I like Guillermo del Toro, The Rule of Three, and Pan's Labyrinth. Some Alice in Wonderland motifs. I'd have to go back and thumb through the book to remind myself. That's what's just coming off the top of my head. But no, I'm a huge fan of del Toro, and yeah, I mean, again, one of these guys. He's like, you could put him up there with Aronofsky and Ari Aster. Definitely an expert in movie symbolism. So here it is. So it's 10:36. How about if I wrap up at this point?
Oh, sure. If your voice is getting tired or you need to get back to work, that's fine. I am very appreciative that you had a chance to be a guest with us, and I highly recommend your cinema symbolism trilogy. Rob, do you, as long as you want to discuss how people can get your books, and we'll wrap up the evening.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you again, Mark, for having me on the Nightlight. I enjoyed the Halloween special. Definitely, certainly covered enough horror movies in there. But we kept it, varied, which is always good. We don't want to concentrate on one thing and one thing only. So, again, thank you for having me on. It was my pleasure to be here this evening. And happy Halloween, everybody, of course. Falls on Sunday this year. My books I have 5 books published. There will be some more on the way. I'm in the process right now of doing some edits to some of my earlier works. These will not be new books. These will just supplant the ones that are currently existing. But the books are all available online through all the major online retailers. This would, of course, include Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million. They are in the print edition. They never go out of print. And the ebook. You can get the Kindle or the Nook. Of course, they're much cheaper than the print edition. Of course, there's no expense. Don't have any paper or ink or anything like that. If you go to any of the online sites and just type in Cinema Symbolism or Cinema Symbolism 3 or The Royal Arch or Pack with the Devil, you'll get the hit. Of course, you can go to my website, which is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV, so my website is just that, Robert W. Sullivan, and then for the 4th, it's the letter I, the letter V for the Roman numerals, IV, robertwsullivan.iv.com. There's links there to purchase the books. There's information about me. There's my biography. There's information about upcoming shows that I'm going to be on, such as this one. Right now there's a bit of a video archive on the media page about my, featuring some of my most recent interviews. Go there, check it out. It's a very easy page to navigate. And if you're interested in what I've been talking about, check out the books. You can get the print editions if you want. You can get the Kindles or the ebooks if you want. Of course, take your pick. Check it out. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV, and that's my website, robertwsullivan.iv.com. And I'll conclude by saying thank you again, Mark, for having me on the Nightlight. It was my pleasure to be here this evening. And happy Halloween, of course, to everybody. It's 'tis the season, and Samhain is here, and happy Halloween.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rob. Keep us posted about Cinema Symbolism Part 4. You're always welcome to come back. If you want to cover anything else, just let us know. You're always welcome. So, hey, Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed.
I'll shoot you an email tomorrow.
Okay. So, sounds great. And I just want to thank the listeners for tuning in tonight. And thanks, Rob. Thanks, Barbara, for producing the show. Let's see. I don't know if we have a show. I'll see everyone, I think, next Tuesday. Mary Joyce is tomorrow night. So it should be a interesting show wherever she wants to delve into some unique topic. So you got another show lined up tomorrow with Barbara and Mary. So we'll see everyone next Monday and Tuesday as well. So take care. Have a nice holiday and a great rest of the week.